Hey guys, I have part 2 for you. This is, of course, Philip Campos versus Danny. So not a lot of exciting news to report because I gave you really more of a long, juicy, comprehensive rundown in part 1. Part 2 was a much quicker scene, and it only essentially consisted of one thing. It consisted of Kendrick Moxon questioning Philip Campos on the stand. Dorothy Gibbons-White has yet to have her opportunity. She should have that tomorrow, but the questioning on Moxon's part hasn't even officially concluded. So most of this will just be quoting from notes, because what's interesting about this is why it's interesting to try to write down the exact words as best you can, because Campos is going to try to explain why he felt he was the one victimized with his scooter by Danny, that he was the one that felt threatened, that he was the one that felt upset, and that he had faced this continuing, this is just what he said, this is his side of the story, that he's just saying has faced this continuous stream of harassment, not only by Danny, but by a myriad of other protesters that has caused emotional duress, whatever it might be. And that his line is, they kept stopping me from going to church. So it's funny, it's from my church, from worshiping at my church. So the language that Philip Campos used was actually very religious, and I'm sure Moxon told him that he should bring some religiosity in terms of his syntax, in terms of his vocabulary, to get some sympathy from the judge, so the judge could potentially see Scientology perhaps as this besieged religion versus the billion-dollar cult that it is. Now, it might not necessarily work because, again, guys, the judge is the same judge that is working on the DOA thing, and Moxon is also, of course, the attorney over there. So I don't know how well it's going to work or not. So, first, what's interesting about this is that Moxon tries to frame Philip in a positive way. He tries to kind of frame him as a good man. And that's kind of what you want to do with your client. If you're up first with your client, the first thing is to set the stage. Set this, if you want the person on the stand and they're part of the opposing team, you want to discredit that person. If that person is on your side, you want to create an image that they're likable and that they're decent, well-meaning people. So, Moxon says, "Why are you in Los Angeles?" Philip responds, "To get services for my church. I live in an apartment only half a mile from the church. I'm from Kentucky originally." Moxon says, "So you came to LA for particular services not found in Kentucky?" And he says, "Yes." And then Moxon asks him about the scooter, and he used the scooter for support. Philip said, and this is, again, trying to set Philip in a sympathetic manner, because Moxon's really trying to get into the details as to why Philip uses the scooter. Philip says, his exact words, "My hands and legs shake from diabetes. My ankle hurts so much that I have to use it on a crutch. So in lieu of a crutch, this scooter is more beneficial." And Moxon says, "Do you have any other physical difficulties?" Just to try to pile things on and pile on the sympathy. And Phil says, "I have to take medicine for my heart. And, of course, after the incident with Danny, my back now hurts." And then Moxon says, "If you walk without a scooter, does it hurt your foot and are you unable to walk?" And Philip says, "Yes, essentially." And then Moxon says, on March 9th, that was one of the days in question, "Did you get services from the church?" And Phil says, "Yes, I got services." And Moxon said, "And on the way to your services in various days, on that day specifically, it was hard to get to your church, wasn't it? There were protesters there. Did you ever respond to the protesters?" And then Philip says initially no, but at some point I changed my actions because I saw a group of protesters yelling at me. Moxon said, "Was Danny part of this group?" Philip says yes, And some are in this room that were also part of the group and looked at the audience, of which DOA, Alara, myself, Kelly, Sandra, the other mod, and mod 3. Sorry, I can't remember all the names. I feel like an asshole. And Tori was there. So it could have been one of a bevy of any of those people. There's one back there on a bullhorn, and he was yelling at me. And then Moxon said, "That's the large man in the back of the room, no?" And Philip says, "Yes," referring to DOA. And so Moxon said, "So did you get a sense of fear when these protesters were approaching you?" And Philip says, "Later on, yes. Initially, I didn't realize what was going on." Moxon then plays a video, and guys, this is hard for me to do because I've seen some of the video before, but I cannot actually see what's being played on the video. So that's certainly a disadvantage for me. So you kind of have to figure out and piece together what part of what video they're talking about, but you could hear it a little bit, but not necessarily well enough to fully understand what was happening in the video. But the video is played. And in the video, there's a loud voice, and the loud voice goes, "He tried to run him over." Guess who that might be? And that was from Aja. And that "he tried to run him over" is the quote that's going to be used a multitude of times to kind of validate this restraining order that Philip is going. That essentially Danny had a warning from Aja not to run the guy over, and he essentially, or Danny had a warning from Aja to get out of the way because he's going to run him over, and that he didn't get out of the way. And Moxon asks, "Were you aware of the protesters as they were coming for you?" And then they look at all these logistical stuff, and they see a visual that I don't see. And he asks, "Is that Danny to your right?" And 2 women next to him. Phil says, "Yes." Phil says, "I got out of their way. I got off the sidewalk." Moxon said, "Did anyone say, 'Excuse me,' when Danny was in front of you and passed you by?" Philip said, "No." Someone did say to Danny that he was blocking him. "And I moved a few steps," says Philip. "There was also a person in front of me," says Philip, "and I tried to go to the right. Then another blocked me. I tried to go to the left. But I was blocked again by another protester," says Philip. Moxon says, "Did you try to move forward?" Philip says, "Yes, I did." So Moxon says, so at this point, with this contact with Danny, Moxon says, "So your feet aren't on the ground anymore. You're not walking necessarily anymore." Philip says, "That's correct. I'm trying to keep my balance and not fall. Danny pulled my scooter. I'm holding on to a tree as well as my phone." So that's the story, that he's holding on to something sturdy, and that the force of Danny was so significant, he essentially got his feet to be shifted, and he was kind of trying to hold himself up kind of like that. And it's a lot of semantics, but it's interesting to see how one side views a visual presentation, another side views it completely different. And of course, we'll get that different viewpoint from Dorothy Gibbons White tomorrow. Number 5, Moxon says, "After the incident, did Danny go further west? And did you see a woman with black glasses?" That was Aja. So again, a clip of Aja is shown yet again. And it is Aja saying, "You tried to run him over. So I need to correct myself. So I said, don't run him over. He will run you over. It is Aja saying, in Danny's defense, you tried to run him over. So they're showing that, which seems bizarre. And Dorothy says the transcript is inaccurate, and the judge sort of agrees and says to Moxon, you're asking leading questions. You asked Phil if he was hard of hearing, but then you go into a completely different topic. So Moxon gets back on track. When you heard Aja say, you'll run him over, meaning he's talking to Philip Campos. When you heard Aja say, you'll run Danny over, was it clear? The video was played. Remember, Philip tried to indicate that he was hard of hearing as well. He said he never heard that, and he said he ran to security and that he was frightened. Phil then said, I called the police. Remember, all this resulted in an arrest. Phil then said, I called the police and told them I was attacked. Someone tried to steal the scooter from my hands, and I had extreme back pain as a result. Moxon says, were you concerned post-arrest that he was back out on the street again? Campos says, yes, it made me very upset, very scared, very worried. And when I was holding the scooter to try to steady my back so it wouldn't be in pain as my back was wrenched, I was in fear. And then Moxon asked about the results of this so-called scooter incident and his back specifically. Keep in mind, Campos is 72 years old. So did healthcare cover anything? Did you try? Philip says yes, but healthcare didn't cover any chiropractic services. Mr. Moxon says yes, but you eventually got treatment. Phil says yes, I had to pay out of pocket. And as part of the evidence that's being shown is a chiropractic receipt. Interestingly enough, the receipt for the chiropractor was dated an entire 2 months after the scooter incident. So Campos waited 2 months, apparently, to see a chiropractor, and then all of a sudden got the chiropractor and got the receipt that he needed possibly for court. You're just trying to analyze everything and why people do the things they do. Dorothy Gibbons-White very intelligently rejects to those receipts. She says they are dated 2 months later. But again, man, this is all setting this. You can already see the tactics. You can see the tactic on day one. It's obvious. It's create sympathy for Phil, just like Joey. Paint Phil as this needy old man, this victim, this innocent, sweet old man who's in immense pain, who not even a doctor could fix. And again, it's eliciting sympathy. He's a man committed to his religion, committed to his worship, committed to his church. So you paint this picture, and that's part of what being a talented attorney is. And I'll give Moxon's been incompetent in a lot of ways. Like, he wants to depose 86 GOP after the verdict, but he was at least competent in trying to paint somewhat of a sympathetic portrait of Mr. Campos. I'm not saying I agree with it, but that's the portrait that he's trying to paint. Phil says, I went to the chiropractor, got a little emotional, 4 times. I'm still in pain when I get up. Then they play a little more of the video. He says, this is the part where my scooter is getting pulled away from me. So Campos is saying his scooter is actively being pulled away from me. And Ken says, where are the 3 women in this video? And he says they're on the other, out of camera. He said, my first reaction was to not let this happen, so I gripped my scooter to stay up. So after the incident, Danny is arrested. Phil says, yes, they arrested Danny, but he was soon out again. Moxon says, so May 9th is the other incident. What was your modus operandi? Phil says, on May 9th, I come to the garage to get my scooter out, and I saw Danny at the crosswalk. I didn't want any problems, but I finally decided to confront these guys. I was tired of being afraid. This is all Philip speaking. The garage was across from LRH Way, so I saw them at the crosswalk. I was getting the courage to cross the street, and Danny yelled out, "Get out of here." It was hate speech. It wasn't no protest to me. They said, "Get out. You're out of here. You're going to be in trouble if you don't." It made me uncomfortable, and I had the resolve to not be afraid, to be afraid of them. Which is an interesting thing, because you're trying to paint Philip as a sympathetic character, but what he is almost agreeing to is mutually assured destruction, right? What Philip is saying is, eventually, in the subsequent incident, instead of running away and not interacting with the dude, he says this is because he wants access to his church. But what he's essentially outing himself by saying he decided to go back into the fray. This is how Joey hung himself. Joey said, well, yeah, admittedly, I've gotten back to have further conversations with them. So Campos might have lost the entire case simply with that statement and didn't kind of realize that. Cool. So yeah, I think we're good. If you guys want to show support, as always, I got a Venmo, PayPal, GoFundMe, all that jazz. Not a PayPal, unfortunately. For you Canadians. I think you could do GoFundMe, though. I don't think you have to be from the U.S. to do GoFundMe. So that works if you're from Canada. But I owe PayPal money, so don't PayPal anything else. If you guys want to support, and yeah, I'm tired as hell. And I'll see you tomorrow. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.